Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Guitar Souls podcast. This is episode number 74, take number 2, but we will get into that. My name is Mr. Levi Clay, and I am here with my good friend, Mr. Mike McLaughlin. How is it going, buddy?
As I said earlier on, that no one else will ever get to hear or see. Yeah, it's fun other than spitting flames out the back.
Yeah.
I made the joke of it being like the start of Bonanza, and you said it's like the Imperial red flag, the red sun. Yeah. Essentially, I have a sore bum. I won't give you any more information than that because you don't need it. Yeah, you certainly don't need to be picturing it.
Well, I mean, so I'm kind of glad in one respect that we missed that last episode and that disappeared, just because there was a lot of graphic detail. It was quite. I felt like I was living out a kind of a brutal death metal album cover. It was horrifying. Yeah, so we recorded an episode and it was great. We had teasing everybody. It was great. We had good conversations. We were talking about stuff, and then I finished up ready to record the second episode, and my audio just stopped recording halfway through because quality. So now I'm monitoring my recording at all times, and if anything happens, I will immediately see it happen, and I'll be able to do something about it. But you know how it is. You live and learn. Or as I was told when I was younger, you live and learn.
Every day's a school day.
And then you die and forget it all. So, I know, right? Deep. But as a tease, the things that you missed us talking about were Metallica having sold thousands of copies of the Black Album in the last week, so still selling more copies than Trapped. Because, of course, Harley Benton have unveiled a new multi-effects unit, which is very cool, very competitively priced, about £129, worth checking out, and also allows you to do some direct recording, which is great.
Very cool.
Mr. Bungle have announced a new album, which is interesting, probably more so not just because of the music, but because apparently Scott Ian is in the band now.
And Dave Lombardo's joining as well to do the drums for it, which is not Dave Lombardo, but Scott Ian's it. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah. We had a long conversation about the NAMM show being cancelled, made a lot of jokes at a lot of people's expense, and, unfortunately, you'll
not
never
a lot
get
of
to
people.
this. Instagram guitarists.
Instagram guitarist and Lance Benedict.
Yeah, and speculated that the NAMM show won't be back next year, but we will see.
I also speculated that Lance Benedict is actually the coronavirus.
You did, yeah.
I don't think it's a coincidence that he went missing and coronavirus appeared. This is him stopping the courts. He's using his powers to get TTM back off the ground.
We need to stop calling it coronavirus and call it the Wrath of Benedict. We talked about the Brent Mason Fender Telecaster, which obviously I'm extremely excited about and I absolutely have to own. That was a really good conversation. I'm disappointed that y'all missed that. But who knows, maybe we'll do a longer conversation about it when I inevitably get one of those guitars. But obviously not the $12,500 one. It'll just be the regular $2,000 one. So, yes. We talked about we talked about Led Zeppelin being sued again for copyright over the third time with Stairway to Heaven, because if at first you don't succeed, try again, and lawyers make lots of money. We poked a little bit of fun at Nickelback releasing a cover of The Devil Went Down to Georgia, not because we dislike Nickelback. Mine and Mike's thoughts on Nickelback, I think we're relatively on the same page. We don't dislike Nickelback in the slightest. I like most of what they've put out. But it seems very strange that they put out a cover of a tune which is fundamentally about instrumental prowess, when that's not really what that band is about. It feels like they're just having a bit of fun during the lockdown, which is fair enough. Features Dave Martone on lead guitar, and that's probably worth talking about, or probably worth checking out, I should say. But I don't think that will go down in the annals of great Nickelback songs. Won't be on a DFS advert anytime soon. And finally, we talked about Rev amplifiers and the fact that somebody tried to scam them and they got caught out. And that was all very good. And of course, Rev and Derek Eastveld turned it into something very positive, because that's the kind of guys they are, because they're nice guys. There was one other thing that we talked about. Do you remember?
No.
This show is brought to you by Ormsby Guitars. We want to thank Perry and the guys over at Ormsby for all of their support. It is very much appreciated. For those unfamiliar with Ormsby and what they do, they're wonderful guitars built by Perry out in Australia. And probably what they're most notable for in recent years is actually doing these runs of guitars that are actually built offshore and then brought into Australia for quality control and then sent on out. So if you head on over to ormsbyguitars.com and check out the pre-order section on their website, you can check out some of the upcoming runs, get involved for a very low price, and prepayment plans, payment over a series of months. Great way to get yourself a killer instrument and an absolutely killer price. So as always, thank you so much for the support, guys. Check them out and let them know that we sent you. Anyway, on with the show. So as always, a massive, massive, extra large thank you to our friends over at Ormsby Guitars. I feel bad because obviously we'd moved to being a weekly show and we were sitting down to record 2 separate episodes for you guys before I go away tomorrow for a week, and we've lost one of them. So maybe, I was going to say maybe what I'll do is I'll upload the part of the show that we did get recorded, but as I'm recording this, I'm literally watching it record over that. So that's long gone. That doesn't exist anymore. I know.
If you want, I'll do a solo TLDR.
Yeah, you could just do a live stream and show people your balls. I don't know. Just do something, do anything. So essentially what you guys are obviously going to mainly be missing out on is extra Ormsby ads. So you're missing out on those extra Ormsby ads. In fact, let's make up for that. This show is brought to you by Ormsby Guitars. We want to thank Perry. I'm just kidding. Don't worry. I cut out that ad halfway through. I know you don't want to keep hearing it, but genuinely, massive thank you to our friends over at Ormsby Guitars. You guys absolutely rock. Please do go and check them out. And
can't wait for the new website.
Yeah, and
cannot wait.
You won't be seeing them at NAMM, obviously, but that's probably a good thing. I think. I think that means that Perry will be able to devote more time to getting cool products out rather than it's just the nature of the business, isn't it? Having to spend a ton of time preparing all these special showpieces for NAMM.
For what Perry had said, they're still going to do a few, but there's no pressure on them, and it doesn't take away from anything else. And it also means that the budget, the marketing budget, etc., they had to put aside for NAMM, they're going to have another couple of nice things. It means that there is another project in the works, shall we say?
Yep.
And more to come. So if anything, this is for everybody who wants to buy an Ormsby. It's for their benefit that they won't be at NAMM, that NAMM won't be going on.
Yep.
So
cool. So this episode will not be dedicated to the news. This episode will be dedicated to a wider discussion when Ultimate Guitar ran with the story Theory versus Feel. Can music theory ruin creativity? Rock stars weigh in. I thought this would be cool to talk about. Definitely an interesting one because actually, little known fact, this show initially, when we were talking about things that we could do for a podcast, it would be on this kind of subject because I'm obviously very deep into my musical literacy, and Mike is the opposite. Mike is an ear player till he dies type thing, and I thought it would be really interesting to see how two people with such different perspectives or different experiences in music could learn from each other. I thought that would be a lot of fun, but ultimately it seemed very high pressure and very nerdy. So we leave the nerdy stuff to guys like the Guitar Hour podcast. But that doesn't mean it's not still a subject that we find interesting, right, Mike?
Completely. You and I quite often fall into this conversation naturally. Just talking about, I'll ask you questions about chord progressions, or I'll give you what my thought is on something, and you'll be like, well, this is how it works, and I'll be like, cool, that didn't make any sense to me, but I'm glad you explained it. No, I don't mean it like that. It's not that I have no basis on it. I know we spoke about this before. I have an advanced higher in music, but I mean, that could count for nothing. I got an A. Funnily enough, actually, I got a B for higher, and the head of department of music at school said, I don't think you should sit advanced higher. And I was like, I'm absolutely sitting advanced higher. There's no chance you're telling me otherwise. There's one thing that I am good at and that I have passion for actually learning more about and doing well, and that is at least performing when it comes to music. So whether you want me or not, I will be pursuing. Thank you. Good. So I'm not completely illiterate, but I am certainly not studied.
Yeah, it's I know what you mean. You're definitely not completely illiterate. Let me ask you a question then. Let's sort of, it feels like we're having an internet debate here, right? But let's define terms then. So before we go into this story, what does music theory mean to you? What does that when we're talking about music theory, what would you think we're talking about there?
To me, the basic tenets of how it works, I know how to drive, but I don't know exactly how an engine works. However, to me, it would be the mechanical theory would be all the parts, or understanding the parts, their functions, how they work together, how some parts don't work together, and how they build up to become what you see in here.
Yeah.
Or what you drive in that specific simile. But that's my understanding of it. All the features of music, all the things that kind of go unspoken when you listen to the music, that build up to make how it sounds, how it's performed, how it comes across, the emotion behind it, all that kind of stuff. To me, tonality, pace, tempo, note choice, whatever else. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. I like while you were saying that, I was trying to sort of think about what you were saying and then see if I could sort of boil it down in how I would categorize what we're talking about. And I think usually I use language as an example. So it would be like talking about learning not just how to speak, but understanding what an adjective is, what a verb is. But I'm going to go with a slightly different approach this time when I talk about it. Yeah. I think it's also like chemistry, right? You don't need to fully understand, when you look at the world around, you don't fully need to understand physics and chemistry. But there are people out there that do have a deep understanding of how things work, why things work, and they can use that. Science is about predictive nature, right? It's about being able to look at the things we know, and based on the things we have observed and tested, we can relatively reasonably predict that if we do this, then this will happen as a consequence of that. It's
hypothesizing and testing.
Yeah. So to me, like, I think music theory is kind of like that. It's like musical chemistry, right? It's why and how things work together, and being able to use that, the predictive power of that, being able to use the theory knowledge you have to maybe expand your musical ideas, to give you new creative things that you can work on, to test out new things that maybe wouldn't just occur to you just from noodling around on the instrument. And that doesn't mean that you can't come across this stuff without having a knowledge of how things work. But to me, that's what that knowledge is. That's what we'll really, I think, be talking about. But of course, we're ultimately going to be reading some quotes from people that maybe have different perspectives on what theory means. I'm actually, on this week that I'm away, I've pre-recorded, and these may be of interest to you actually, I've pre-recorded 2 videos I've started a new series called Mastering Music Theory. And because I've been looking at a bunch of theory books just recently. Now, I didn't learn theory from reading books. I learned theory in school. I did, GCSEs in music. I'm talking English education now. GCSEs in music, and then A levels, AS and A2 levels, which are kind of like that higher and advanced higher level stuff.
Oh, you're right. GCSEs are just like a higher. Yeah. It's the same thing, and then your grading goes with it.
Sure. And then A levels would be advanced higher. Is that the works?
I assume so.
Yeah, somewhere around that.
Because your GCSEs are the same as your O-levels, which is the same as a higher.
Right, okay, yeah.
Fourth year, fifth year, sixth year exams, and it's from your...
We just have totally different ways of measuring things, and it's funny because we're like the same island and essentially the same government, but not quite. I always find trying to talk about education.
Not for long.
I always find trying to talk about education with Scottish people really and I have a fair few friends that are teachers up here, and there's just terminology that they use that I'm like, I don't really know what that means, but cool. But so I did that, and then of course went to university. So when people come to me and they say, well, Levi, what book would you recommend for learning music theory? Most things I learned from books, but music theory was not really something that I learned from books. It was something that I learned as part of my wider education in music. And therefore it's hard for me to recommend music theory books. Of course, I know of lots of books, but I can never really vouch for them and say, this one will get you to where you need to be. So I've been reading through some theory books to try and see if I can sort them in my mind of this is one that I would recommend. And I looked at ones like the Mark Levine one, the jazz book, the Rick Beato book, the Beato book, which is great. Jazzology is another one I like. The ABRSM theory books, I kind of use those to a degree as part of my education, so I'm familiar with those. And I found that there are subjects that are just obviously important things to include in a book on music theory, but when people work on a book on music theory, I think there's this degree of assumed knowledge. You just assume your readers already know these things, so you skip over them, and therefore, I can look at the Beato book and say, well, actually, it's a great book, but it's missing this, this, and this, and these are really important, fundamental aspects of theory that should be learned. So I'm coming at the Master of Music Theory thing really from the ground up. So I would recommend people check those videos out as and when you have time.
Definitely, that sounds great.
And in the long run, I want to be talking about musical chemistry and how things work, and the chemistry of chord progressions, why chord progressions work, why chord progressions have certain impacts on us, and how you can learn a chord progression and then use that knowledge to go, okay, well, if I was going to compose a melody over this or play a melody over this, where would I go for that? Not just going, which pentatonic scale can I force over all of this? What can I really do to play something creative over this? And I think go on.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. On you go.
Well, I was going to say, I just think that's the difference to me in someone that knows a little bit of theory, maybe even not even realizing they know theory, and somebody that goes out of their way to be deliberately ignorant on this stuff. I think when you're deliberately ignorant on this stuff, you're able to create within the bounds of what you know, and that's why you have so many guys that will limit themselves to here's a pentatonic scale, and here's my entire sound is sounds that pentatonic scale fits over the top of. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but as you well know, like, I'm really into country music. I love country music, and I've been listening to a bunch of Mel Haggard over the last couple of weeks because I've been transcribing some of Clint Strong's solos. And when you listen to a song like, I just did a transcription for it, Okie from Muskogee's Coming Home. I put a live video of that up, of Clint Strong's solo on that. Really cool, really nice song. When you fundamentally get down to what that is as a song, it's a chord progression with someone singing a melody over the top. And you could consider it to be an absolute bastard to play over, because there are chords in there which aren't in the key that the song is in. The song is in E flat, but there's chords that you wouldn't expect to be in there. There's a G major in there. There is a C minor, an F. There's a 1-4-5. Yeah, there's lots of chords in there. It does lots of things.
Is it just me? Is it like chords that the root notes fall into whole tone?
No, not in that. It's an interesting observation. Some of those. But you'd expect there to be a G minor in the key of E flat, but there's a G major in here, and it's like knowing how to deal with that when you're playing could be a struggle. If you're trying to sing a melody over it, it's probably a little bit more intuitive. But if you're looking from an instrumental perspective and you're just trying to play a melody over it, that G chord can land, and you're struggling to work out why the scale that you play over everything doesn't really work. And I think that having a little bit of theory understanding can be useful in helping you overcome that. And here's the final thing before we read these comments. The other really important aspect of understanding a bit of theory is for communication, to be able to communicate with other musicians in a more fluent way. We're going to talk about that song that we both had a stab at transcribing, and I think we should probably do more things like that, because I actually enjoyed that. I was watching a film when you, as I said, and I actually I said to Haley, I just need to nip out to the studio for a minute. Mike needs me to send him something, and I literally came out here to have a quick stab at the chord progression and then send it over to you. And then after we'd finished watching the film, I was back out here working, and I was like, I want to dig into that a little bit more. I want to really make sure I know, because I love trying to decipher stuff like that. It's a lot of fun. And then being able to communicate. And the question that we'll probably get onto when we talk about that is, I'm not entirely sure if when I am explaining things to you, if you're just sort of going, okay, cool, but in reality you're just going, I don't know what that means. You know what I mean?
I do get most things, and if I don't get them, I'll ask you what you're talking about. When you start to go into really complicated chords, when you get to chords that go past saying minor or major, 7th, 6th, 13th or whatever, then sometimes I'm like, I need to think about this before I know what it is, but I know how to work it out.
Sure.
It's just that I don't have that as like instant knowledge. It's not like something that's so well practiced that it just comes to mind. It's not muscle memory. Like if somebody, kind of going into what you were talking about earlier, if somebody plays a chord progression to me, I'll work it out most of the time. But if somebody goes, can you name the chords, unless they're like minor, major or basic, I'll be like, nope, not a fucking chance. Which is why the last chord in that progression got me confused, because the root note doesn't fit where the rest of the chord sits, and I'm like, this could be C major 7, but it's actually a B flat in the bass.
Why don't we talk about that song? So what
yeah,
song
we'll go into this. Sorry. Yeah, so I am unashamedly into good pop music. I'm unashamedly into good music. If I think there is a interesting melody or something different or nice chords or just something that kind of catches your attention, I'm all over it. I have audibly sucked the dick of Charlie Puth and voice notes. I love that because it's pop music, but it's interesting enough that it catches you. There's a lot of hooks in there, some cool chords, some cool progressions. Boy's fantastic. It's all off time, but it syncs up together. It's just really clever. That's the one that I champion the most, and that was showed to me. But anyway, the song that I say to Levi, because I showed him a video recently, was Thank You Next by Ariana Grande. If you haven't heard this, you probably live under a rock, because it was quite a big single.
I hadn't heard it.
You do live under a rock. You listen to country music.
I think that means that most people want me to live under a rock that they put me under forcefully.
You're comfortably there. That's fine. Right. Anyway, right. So it's like, on the surface, it's 4 chords. Turns out it's not 4 chords. I had this conversation with Levi because I was like, essentially, it's just 4 chords, and he's like, no, it's based in 4 chords, but there's changes.
Yeah.
Right. So I was like, right. At the expense of looking like a total elitist wank, I'm going to say where the course of this came from, right? I sent Levi a video of Mystique, Mistiq, the YouTuber. I think she Twitch streams as well. And Ariana Gozing plays a 6-string Ibanez bass, a BTB, I believe it is, or a BKB, with the coloured strings. Both tremendous players in their own right. But I sent him a video of the two of them collaborating on playing Ariana Grande, and it's like, when you like Thank You Next, but you also like, and I don't remember what the rest of the title was, but essentially it was them playing a bit of that and noodling over it, and then it going into some absolute nonsense arpeggios. I say nonsense, and it wasn't a mack-upper. I didn't feel it felt that it matched up with the music.
Yeah, not in the spirit of the song.
Exactly, right? But that's just me. But the thing that got me the most, and again, this is me being a total wank, is they got the chords wrong.
And I could hear you're
it
a
right
stickler
away.
for that. You're a real stickler for that.
Totally. And like, if you're going to cover something, unless you're changing the chords to make the song more creative, which some people do, obviously you can
reharmonise and
exactly right. I mean, we all know that Jacob Collier's the best in the world. He is, though.
Yeah, annoyingly so. I'm not into him.
Even if you're not into his music, he's fucking brilliant. You can't deny it.
You can't knock him. He's
just got the ultimate reharmonising ear and brain, and it's like a second language. Anyway, my point is that they had this chord progression, and they were playing the 4 chords as I had heard it, but they were playing the second and the 4th chords wrong, I believe, at least in how I heard it, and I was like, that's fucking annoying. I'm going to try and work this out. So how I'd worked it out in my brain was, it was a F major, and then it went to E major 7 with a G sharp in the bass, then an A minor 7, and then the 4th chord I didn't know what it was, and that's the one I was like to you, right, when I'm working this out by ear in my brain, it sounds like it is a diminished, as if it's like a C major 7, like a diminished part of that. What would that be in F?
See, this is fun because we're getting to get an insight into how you're going about trying to process this.
So, you put me off now.
The thing that's strange to me is you're saying this right, and you're like an F and then an E major, and I'm like, but it's not. It's a semitone higher than that.
Well, relative to me picking the guitar up and playing it, so you're right. Sorry, right. I think maybe if I was doing it with a capo in the first route, it would have made more sense. You need to bear in mind I was also trying to learn it on all of my guitars that are tuned to B standard, so I was a good 4 steps below anyway.
Sure.
So, okay, if I've been a smart ass, right, it's F sharp major, and then F major 7 with an A in the bass.
And we get to be really theoretically nerdy about this and say, well, okay, if we call that an F sharp major 7, it would need to be an E sharp.
Okay.
Yeah. But with us being stupidly stickler.
See, that's the thing. That's the wee bits that I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know when you would call some, because I've seen people saying flat, other people saying sharp, and I'm always like, I'm just going to call it what I think it is, because people will know what I'm talking about.
That's the important thing.
And if they correct me, brilliant, that's fine.
Yeah, no, but that's the most important thing. Like, you don't necessarily have to be able to use the bang-on correct verbiage in the same way that I don't need to communicate with you using the Queen's English for you to understand what I'm saying. If you say F sharp major to F sharp to F major 7, I'm not going to immediately go, well, really, we want to call that G flat and F, and without that, I can't understand I know what you're saying. I can translate it to playing.
Musical colloquialism.
Yeah. So, how much do you know about the people that put that track together? Like I don't know what you even call the producer. Would that have been put together by the producer who came up with a loop for someone to sing over the top of?
I would think it's probably like either a producer that did the loop, or a ghostwriter that wrote the full song. The music industry's weird and wonderful in that way. There's a lot of people who are not credited for the music they write, other than all the money they get.
Yeah.
Is it Max Mears, the guy's name?
Max Martin.
It's like Max Martin, like the most successful ghostwriter on the planet.
I mean, he's not a ghostwriter. He's credited for everything he writes.
Well, you know what I mean, though. He writes songs for other people, but it's never his name that's on it.
We don't really think of his name as being,
so much so I didn't even know his name.
Sure.
There you go.
Well,
you know what I mean?
I assume it was probably, like, you think of guys like Kanye West, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know he makes the music that he does, but it's not him sitting down at a piano, you know, and composing. It's him putting things together and layering things up to create beats, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's an art form in its own right. But I think when you do that, and I definitely know this to be the case now, because since having my new PC set up and ads sort of working out me as a person again, I'm getting different sorts of ads thrown at me. There was a long time where I was just getting Archetype Nolly thrown at me over and over again, but I keep getting all of these what I can only describe as plugins designed for hip-hop producers thrown at me.
Everybody gets them loop packs and if I had this when I was a kid, I'd be a millionaire. Fuck off.
But that's an alien concept to me, because I don't need somebody to have pre-composed loops for me to then put together and then make music from that. I did that a lot when I was a kid. Do you remember Music 2000 for PlayStation? Had a ton of fun with that, right?
The best thing you could do with that was layer the explosion sounds, because if you had enough of them, it would genuinely distort the TV speakers and nearly blow them to bits. Me and Kieran and a good friend of mine when I was a child, Ryan, used to do that, and I'm talking like 30 or 40 layers of that at the end of this ridiculous, stupid song. And it would be like ruin the TV. I think that's actually genuinely partially where Kieran's ability to produce stuff and program came from.
To be
playing with that program.
Yeah. I spent a ton of time. I had no interest in music at the time, but evidently it subconsciously put this idea of creativity in music is something that you can do. But the point I was making is like that as a genre has evolved into these guys now that when they produce, what they're really looking at doing is finding layers that they can put on top of each other. And I feel that when I listen to this recording, this is somebody who isn't theoretically versed, just putting some layers together, and they like the sound of it. And they're happy with that. I could be totally wrong on that, but the reason I say that is, and I'll encourage everyone to go and listen to this tune now to see what I'm talking about. It's not a bad tune by any stretch of the imagination. I quite like it. In the verse, as the song opens, you kind of have, it's almost like there's three voices, and I don't mean vocal voices, but I mean parts. You have what you assume to be a bass part, what you assume to be a low melody, if you like, and then chords in the right hand on a piano over the top of it. And they interact with each other in a certain way, and we could name those chords. And that's, I think, where that problem came in, where you get to that final chord, and there's a note in the bass that you're like, that's a weird note to have in the bass there. And it is, but we haven't heard the wider context at that point, because then after that's played, I think maybe twice, maybe three times more, it continues, but then an actual bass part comes in where it's real low, and you'll notice that when that happens, when it goes to that chord, it isn't playing that note in the bass, it's playing the note that you would expect to hear in the bass. So it's fun, because the first time you hear it, you're totally right, you hear that chord and you're like, what the hell is that? I can't even remember what I transcribed it as now, to be honest.
It was something crazy in my brain. It was like if you played, forgiven that I'm again a semitone out, if you played a C7 as a bar chord, but had a B flat in the bass note.
That's exactly what it was. Yeah. Well, I think actually I had it as a C sus chord with a B flat in the bass, but still, it's that idea of there being a major chord with the flat 7 of the chord in the bass, which immediately starts to sound a little bit jarring to the ear.
It's because the bass note went like, it was like dun 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 dun, so it was like just a semitone up.
Yeah, not what you'd expect.
Whereas you know the chords are somewhere else, and you're like, what's going on here?
Yeah, the thing I really liked about that tune is you have the first bass note, and I'm trying to be deliberately very non-music theory about this. You have that first bass note, and then it jumps up 3 frets. Let's just say 3 frets. It jumps to somewhere where you don't really expect that to go, and that immediately caught me. I was like, this is kind of cool. I like this. It's an interesting sounding chord. And you totally rightfully, was it right? Or was it? I think you were slightly wrong on that. I'm pretty sure it's a dominant. Yeah, it's a dominant 7 chord with the. So if you're saying E with G sharp, E major 7 with G sharp in the bass, I'm pretty sure it's an E7 with a G sharp in the bass. But still, that's a really cool movement, takes you by surprise, doesn't go where you would expect it to. And this is why I said it's not the same 4 chords that repeats, because it has that chord, which we could describe as a first inversion chord. It's a major chord with a third of the chord in the bass. Sounds a certain way, very unsettling sound, and has that feeling of that note wants to move up a semitone to resolve to the next chord, which is exactly what it does in that chord progression. Does it do that? Something like that.
You're right, it goes from being like, if I was playing it physically, it would be 4, 2, open, 1, open, open. Would be like the E with the G sharp in the bass, and then it goes up to A, so you only go up a fret.
Yeah,
which is it A major at that point?
It's a common, that's what you want that to do. That first inversion chord really wants to move up, and if I use
first
inversion
minor,
chords,
that
third chord is minor. It works. It works for going to either a minor chord or a major chord. First inversion chords, I'm a huge fan of. I use them all the time on the Hellcat album without even realizing it. I just found a shape that I liked and always resolved it in the same way. And then on analysis, I was like, oh, okay, it's first inversion chord. But the reason I say it's not the same chord progression just over and over and over is because when it goes to the chorus, it doesn't have that moving up to that bass note. It moves down the semitone, which is just really impactful. It's like you've heard this chord progression played a certain way, and then you get it's not a different version of it, but it's a variation on it. And I thought that was kind of nice. Anyway,
plus, just before we go any further, the 4th chord in the chorus is just a normal C7.
Yeah,
or it's not a C7; it's a semitone up. But you know what I mean? Like it's like a way more normal, traditional version of that chord progression.
Yeah,
it's cool. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed chatting that way. Because it was like, you're like, no, it's not. And I'm like, no, it isn't. Listening, I'm like, no, you're absolutely right, it's not.
Yeah.
Because I had just sent you the link, and it was what I'd heard in my brain. I was like, this must just be the same 4, not realising obviously where the bass was going was causing like an inversion, or the chords were in like an inversion, and then whatever else. So that was a lot of fun. I think that would have been something that would have been really fun for you and I to do and talk about, like a live stream. It's a shame we haven't quite worked out yet how we can get guitars and vocal audio on both sides to come through in a good manner. For anybody that knows how to use virtual audio cable, you're more than welcome to try and school us. Both of us have tried, and the program isn't red hot dog shit, but the applying the program certainly seems to be. And that's not because it's a bad program, it's because it's obviously designed for people who know what they're doing, and I have not a fucking clue.
Well, I mean, there is an easy way around this, because we're virtually, I mean, Hayley said this to me the other day when we were on a walk. I was like, I'm doing 2 nights ago, I was like, I'm doing podcasts with Mike tomorrow, and she went, why are you still doing those remotely? And I was like, because we're in isolation. She's like, but you're allowed to be in the same room now. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, fair point. We can probably go back to being sat in the same room at some point. And when we do that, that'll be much easier for us to play with guitars.
Right, cool. Well, you know what? Here's the perfect opportunity. If anybody listening to this or watching this wants to see and hear that, let us know. Because I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Spending time with you, playing guitar.
Yeah. I'm massively intimidated, right, by the concept, because I do a lot of live transcribing on YouTube, right? But there's certain things that you don't see me transcribing a whole lot of on YouTube. And it's because that stuff takes me a lot of time. And it's not interesting to watch me struggle with working out how to play something. And these kind of richer sounding chords would be those things. I'm going to make a reference to, I mean, it's a huge YouTube channel. I don't even know why I'm bothering making a reference to this guy. Like, people are unfamiliar with his stuff. But Charles Cornell. You're aware of Charles Cornell's YouTube channel?
I'm not big on YouTube, and I don't mean that as in like I don't watch it. I don't know enough.
Okay.
Because I don't have like a presence myself other than with yourself on the guitar solos.
You've probably seen this guy. I'm going to send you a link to it now, just while I talk about him. I'm sending Mike a video now of Charles Cornell reacting to Charlie Puth's Boy, and so Charles Cornell is a piano player. Great piano player.
100% seen this. I watched this actual video of him working it out.
Yeah.
And him talking about how the movements don't fit, but they do, and how the intro starts and whatever else. Sorry.
So he's I don't know if he has perfect pitch or not, but he plays like a piano player, right? He hears chords and he can just immediately give you a great representation of what it sounds like. And this is the real struggle, and something that I'm going to be talking about in this Mastering Music Theory series. Guitar is an incredible instrument, because it's very easy to pick up and play, very quick to pick up and play. And we can do a good job of playing most things because, unlike the flute, we can play melodies, but we also are a chordal instrument. And there's not a whole lot of chordal instruments out there. When you really think about it, most instruments are melodic instruments. They play melodies. Very few instruments can really play chords. We can play chords, but but we can't play chords the way piano players play chords. Things are a lot more available to you as a pianist, and all of this stuff that we've been talking about, nerding out on this particular chord progression. You just have so many more options as a piano player. And really, when I was working that progression out, I should have been using my keyboard, but I'm not a great keyboard player. So I'm trying to do this stuff on the guitar, and I have a really good understanding of harmony and application of harmony on the guitar. Like, it's super in-depth, that knowledge, but it's still, when I'm doing it, I have to acknowledge that when it comes to imitating an actual chord on a recording, you can't get close on the guitar. You can't get close on a guitar at all.
No,
because
you're right.
You'll often, especially in jazzy stuff, you'll have 3, potentially even 4 notes that are all a scale tone away from each other, these clusters of chords that create these nice tensions in a chord, and that stuff's a nightmare to do on the guitar. And I don't want to be playing these chords where I'm like breaking my hand to play something that ultimately also doesn't even sound very good on the guitar.
The other option you've got is buying an extended range and tuning up, which is even less friendly.
Yeah, but even if you buy an extended range, like, you're still limited to the 4 fingers that we have.
I mean, you get guys like Tommy Emmanuel, etc., who put artificial harmonics and natural harmonics together to make it to expand the range of a guitar. But you're right, at the end of the day, you can only really play 6 notes together. You've got 6 strings, and you're limited to that as your polyphonic voice per se. Whereas a piano, you can press the sustain pedal and fucking you're away. You know what I mean?
So I would make this as a recommendation, and as I always say, it's one of my big regrets. If you're wanting to take music theory semi-seriously, learn to play some piano. You don't even need to be able to play piano well. The thing you're going to find with every music theory book you look at, every single one of them, even the Steve Vai one, which is garbage, by the way, but the book that says is for guitarists, a music theory book for guitarists, the amount of stuff in there that's in standard notation, that's really designed to be shown and played on a piano is high, and you'll get that with all music theory books. There's just musical examples, and it really, you want to look at it and you want to go, okay, let me play this and understand it, and you don't get to do that on a guitar. It just doesn't work. So piano, learn it.
Maybe that's a big part of why I couldn't get that chord progression easily, and why you were kind of, as you say yourself, with Thank You Next, like you were like trying to work it out, because you're right, there's obviously notes in those chords that you probably couldn't finger, certainly not comfortably, on the guitar, because it's on a synth of some kind.
And even like the compromises you have to make on the guitar to get the voicing. Voicings are really important. You can take a specific chord sound and play it and make it sound dramatically different just in how you voice that chord. And the guitar is limited in what we can do voicing wise. I don't need to pat you on the back, but not that I've described you as musically illiterate and literally meant musically illiterate, right? But you've demonstrated clearly you've got like a pretty decent understanding of terminology and shit, because you didn't just say, I was working out this chord and trying to work out what the hell it was, and I've got these notes and these are the notes, but I don't know what that is. Just being able to say what you said, where you're like, it's a C major or like a C7, but there's with a B flat in the bass. Like, for anyone out there that's looking to get into this world of having a better developed ear, that's probably the best place to start. Really understanding what chords are, what triads are, major and minor triads, and then understanding that, well, we can play any one of these triads and we can put a different note in the bass, and to give you different sounds. And sometimes that will give you a sound that you're very experienced with. If you take like a C major triad and put an A in the bass, you could look at that and say, well, that's a C major triad with an A in the bass, or you could say that's an A minor 7 chord. Either would suffice, but I think
what you're saying is that it matters on the voice in there, doesn't it? Just what you were talking about before.
It's a very specific. That's probably a less specific example. I'll give you a really specific example of this, actually. So, talking about voicings, these are slash chords, when you have one chord with another note in the bass. If we take
like a D/G,
D over G,
or D over F sharp,
or D over F sharp,
because that's
you could do any of those. So D over F sharp would be an inversion, because you've got the F sharp.
Because that's the first inversion, because the major second,
third.
Third.
It's got a third of the chord in the bass.
So, aye.
Whereas D over G,
sound.
It is a chord. You could play a D major chord and put a G in the bass. It's going to sound nice. It's just going to sound a lot more like a G major 7 sound than it will sound like a D chord. A really common voicing you'll hear is like a G major chord, but not with a G in the bass. You'll hear an A in the bass instead. And you'll see this written two ways. Some people will write that as an A7 sus, and some people will literally write G over A. They're functionally... You'll often play the same thing, but they are different things in terms of what you would play. If you say to me, play A7 sus, I'm thinking very specifically about what that chord would contain. Whereas when you say to me, play G over A, we're not going to be confused. I'm literally going to play a G major triad and put an A in the bass, and an A7 sus might not necessarily result in me playing that specific sound. So slash chords can be really, really useful for that. And honestly, I think just that, having that skill, like I say, being able to play major and minor triads, and most of the time you're not going to have to fuck around with putting different notes in the bass, but taking major and minor triads like that, and I'm going to reference country because I listen to a lot of it, but just putting on a song, a country song, a pop rock song, a song that isn't just power chords, and just work out what the chord progression is, it's so unbelievably good. It's such an unbelievably good use of your time. One I did with a student just yesterday, I like to do it for this type of thing, is the Brad Paisley song Water. I think it's a really cool song to check this out for, because it uses a little bit more than just a 1, 4 and 5 major chord type thing. There's other chords in there, but they're not hard to work out, they're not hard to hear. And the more you experience that, the more you put yourself in that territory, you're sort of arming yourself with the tools to understand theory a little bit better down the road. Because to be fair, let's be real honest here, based on the terminology that we started this conversation with, where let's define terms, we're not really talking about music theory at this stage, are we? We're talking about ear training, talking about the ability to work out chords. That's an ear training thing.
You're right, and I think another way to look at it, we're looking for kind of similes or ideas that come with it. It's like cooking. You can learn the basics of cooking, but you learn how to flavour things and where all the wee bits go in that are different ingredients to make something nicer as you go on. And it's trial and error and finding out what works with other things and what leads you to other places. My ear training, for lack of a better term, because I don't really practice it per se, came accidentally. Like when I was younger, I wanted to learn guitar, and this sounds really stupid, and I've posted this on Facebook a few times when people were talking about people like, let's call them haters, right, or doubters or whatever, right, like whatever you want to call it, people who are just critical of you, but not because they want to see you succeed and they want to help you, just critical because they're either jealous or they don't believe in you. When I was younger and I was at school and I started playing guitar, maybe it was friendly jibes, maybe it wasn't, I don't know. I certainly don't think there's any real bad context to it, but people used to make shitty comments because the songs I was learning at first, like the first song I think I learned was Green Day, Time of Your Life, and then Pink Floyd, Wish You Were Here, and like just basic chord songs. I mean, like anybody that picks up a guitar is going to learn these basic songs to start them off, right? But I used to get shitty comments, and it used to just propel me to want to learn more. So when I was listening to songs and I was playing the chords and stuff, I would always unwittingly in my brain be like, you need to learn, how does that go? And it was like a natural curiosity of where would that lead. And the more I played guitar and the more I got in tune and accustomed to what notes sound like a low E on a guitar, I could just be like, right, that's a that's flat, but you know what I mean, you get relative pitch quite quickly if you're playing all the time and you're thinking about music all the time. That led me into trying to work out melodies and how I would play it on guitar. Whether it was something I wanted to play or not didn't matter. Music would come on and I would be like, oh, that's cool, like I understand that. I kind of get where that's coming from, and then it would be like breaking down chords into arpeggios or whatever, like Paul Gilbert's cover of I Feel Loved, Donna Summers. It's just a major 7, but without the third. So open 5th, and then
it's a flat 7 in there, isn't it? It's a dominant 7 chord.
Is that a flat 7? Okay.
Yeah. But this
I'm just going by.
But no, but that's the point, isn't it? Right? I think that what you really have is and I always talk about this, I always compliment you and tell people that they underestimate how good your ear is for stuff, because you have that ability to work things out, but your ability to communicate them is lacking.
and that's where we've had the conversation of me feeling like I let myself down because I don't know theory, and you always say, no, you're not letting yourself down.
You do know theory, like you've got the most important thing, which is you can hear things and play them. You're just not 100% accurate with your ability to communicate them, but that's the easy part to learn. The amount of people I know that know all the theory in the fucking world but can't play a chord progression, can't hear a chord progression and play it is astonishing. And I think that would be a fun thing to kind of revisit on the podcast and get you trained up in that respect.
We said this for the start. I said that to you. It'd be really fun for us to do some sort of interactive series where essentially you throw things at me like we did before. Remember, you used to put your looper pedal on and be like, right, just play over this.
Yeah.
And you would just watch me being bewildered to eventually get to the point where it's like, that kind of sounds like it might be right. And you'd be like, no, but yeah. And that's cool. It was fun. Yeah. I like that.
Right, let's get on topic, because I've got like 10 minutes before I need to run out of the house. But that was a great conversation. And I had a lot of fun. I'm excited about talking more about that. Let's get a feel for where other people stand on this. So these are some quotes from musicians. I'm going to pick one and read it, and then you pick one and read it, so on and so forth, and we'll get an idea for what we feel about this. So when Malmsteen was asked, do you feel that understanding music theory is essential to being an original musician? He says, absolutely, abso-fucking-lutely, man. Listen, if you want to write a book that will make people feel engaged, and you want to paint a picture with words, if you don't know the grammar, and you haven't mastered the language, it's pointless. So it's rubbish. It's fucking bullshit when people say, I play with feeling. That's okay, I play with feeling too. But if you don't have the technique and the knowledge to convey this feeling so that other people can understand it, but you don't, when I play, I put my whole soul into what I play, but what I play is also very, very correct. All right. It
sounds like Trump.
I know.
I've got the best theory, the best in the world.
It's one of those things where you can be a classical musician and play by sight reading, or you can be extremely well educated in theory and improvise with the knowledge that you have. So you'll improvise something and people will say, that's amazing, when did you write that? And you'll say, I wrote it now. Improvisation is the genius of composition. All great
Genesis.
Yes, all great compositions were improvised. Sorry, what? I'm going to stop the quote there. Just because I want to poke a bit of fun at Malmsteen there. Don't pretend that you're an expert on this stuff, mate. When you talk about theory in your autobiography and you're wrong about stuff, like you're incorrect about stuff. You're an expert of the things that you know, but even then, you're not really, are you? Come on, make sense?
Very much so. I'm kind of on board that Malmsteen must know some theory, but at the same time, like that was more like a self-flating quote than it was really matching the question.
Yeah.
There's a good one for Red Beach. Yeah. So with your background in piano, do you have any schooling in music theory? None. Zero. Now I think at Red Beach, I've seen quite a few that the Hot Licks stuff that he did, if you remember.
Playing that old
Breaking Out, his DVD was called.
Ibanez Voyager, Cutting Loose.
Cutting Loose, that's the one, and that's the opening track on that.
I transcribed that for someone just recently.
Speaking of cool root notes going under chords and knowing over the stuff, that I love that. I think he's playing his dynamite, his whammy bar ability, dynamite. Anyway, like not the biggest and most well-known guitarist these days, but has been in some ridiculous bands.
He's still playing with Whitesnake, I'm sure. So.
Is he still playing with Whitesnake? Even better.
Yeah.
So the next question was, do you think that this has helped or hindered your career as a guitarist? Has it helped you find your own voice in relation to him not having any schooling in music theory when he played piano? And his reply was, I think it's hurt me more than helped me that I don't read music. I think there were situations where it would have helped if I had read music, like I auditioned for Hall & Oates and I didn't get it because I was playing the right chord but the wrong inversion of the chord. It was on like Rich Girl or something. I wasn't used to playing the chord you're supposed to play, so I had a really hard time playing it. They loved the solo that I did at the audition. I told them I was great at soloing, and they said, yeah, obviously, but I couldn't play that chord. So I told them I would have to practice that one because it was weird for me, and that was it. I didn't get the gig. There have been a couple other times where it would have been helpful to be able to read. But the thing is, I know a couple of people who I went to school with who went to 4 years of music college and came out without any soul. they all just sounded the same. All those guys at Berkeley, they were all playing scales and they kind of sounded the same. So I've definitely got my own sound when I play the guitar, and I like that. I like it. The second I hear a guitar somewhere on a record, I know it's me. I don't think I would have had that if I had just stuck it out at Berkeley rather than just doing 2 semesters of partying.
Yeah.
It's very useful, and I like that he acknowledges I probably missed out on a gig from not having that knowledge. And that's kind of ties into what I was talking about with you. Like, if I had, I would love to do sessions for people. I would love to, and I know for a fact that if people put music on, I would work out at least roughly where the chords are before somebody went, that's the wrong chord. But if it was like, here's a session, there's the sheet music, I would be like, Levi, help! I swear to God, I just would not know where to start. Even though it was quite a serious part of the advanced higher. I think advanced higher is an equivalent of HNC.
If you're not using it, mate, you lose it. My reading will be bad now. And it used to be shit hot.
But even then, I remember you saying, my reading's not that good. And when you stayed in your old flat down in Colton Hess, I remember you bringing out the Final Fantasy music and then just playing it. And then being like, oh, that's a bum chord. And I'd be like, you're just fucking most of the way through the piece before you played one note wrong.
Yeah, I mean, as the chops are still to a degree there, but they're certainly not where they used to be, because I'm not using it, and therefore you lose it. And I think theory can kind of be that too. Theory is that type of thing as well. You have to use the stuff or you lose it. And I do, to be fair, like, generally speaking, we don't speak very highly of Ultimate Guitar's reporting on stuff and the articles that they write, but this one actually isn't that bad, because it's semi-balanced. They don't have an agenda. They're not putting this up to convince you one thing or the other. Reb is not anti-theory there, but instills the virtues of feel, as well as knowledge. And that's fucking cool to me. I think that's really cool that because both these things exist. We had a long section where we were talking about Brent Mason on the podcast that no longer exists. And mate, Brent doesn't know anything. And nothing. His knowledge of theory is non-existent. He can't read. Just none of it is there. And yet he's one of the most recorded session guitar players of all time. He plays what his main passion isn't even country music. It's jazz. He plays jazz. He doesn't know any theory.
Speaking of theory, did you not call Larry Carlton out that time we were at the
I asked him a question, and I was disappointed that he didn't actually fucking answer it.
I kind of shrugged it off, and you were like, that's because he doesn't know the answer.
I don't even know if it's that. I love Larry Carlton, don't get me wrong, and I love his approach to how he thinks about theory and playing over changes and things like that. But there's something about Larry that really pisses me off, and it's that when you go see Larry Carlton play concerts, he'll have a section in the middle of the concert where he's like, so has anybody got any questions? Anyone? And he'll do a Q&A in the middle of a gig. And that would be fine if you were actually okay with the Q&A side of things. But he doesn't want to answer people's questions. He wants to talk about himself. He wants people to ask him about Steely Dan and shit like that. When I asked him that question, I don't care how long you've been playing for, right? You've got a musician in the audience that is interested in you talking about nerdy music stuff. And I find it really sad that clearly that passion for the nerdy music stuff has gone. I can't imagine that ever being the case for me. I'm never going to turn around to someone and say, I don't care about that stuff. I'm going to go, cool, you're interested in that. Well, let me show you how interested I am in that to kind of spur your interest in that.
Do you not think that could maybe be chopped away? Because I'd imagine that you would only get to that stage from persistent, tell me about this band, tell me about you, tell me about that experience, who's this person, what were they like? I think there need to be a lot of piling on of less important but obviously more asked questions before you would get to that stage.
I just hate this idea of that autopilot response when I've seen him in concert for 3 times now, clinics and concerts, and inevitably someone's always going to ask, what was it like playing with Steely Dan? And I just want to turn around to these people and be like, haven't you fucking heard him answer that question before? If you're such a big fan that you've paid all this money to come and see him, surely you've heard Larry Carlton talk about what it was like playing with Steely Dan before. Maybe you want to come out of this experience being a better musician, not just hearing Larry tell a story that he's told 20 fucking times before. Anyway, I'm going to read another quote.
No, you're right though. Even talking about the master classes that were held in Wishaw and in Glasgow, everybody else came at it with an approach of, we'll tell daft stories, but it's about the music. It's about getting people engaged and even giving them ways to think themselves and how they can be a better player and they can approach things different. Matthias Sean Baxter. Who else did I see? Who else was I there for? Alex Hutchins.
Yeah.
Martin Miller.
It's funny,
Tom
after
Quayle.
that Larry Carlton thing, I won't name who, but I had a couple of people actually kind of tease me for asking nerdy questions during a masterclass with a master guitar player. And I'm just like, we're on totally different fucking pages. If you would rather be at this sort of thing and ask Larry Carlton what his favourite brand of fucking toothpaste is.
What's your favourite Steely Dan song and why?
Yeah, like I've got an opportunity to actually learn something and better myself here. I'm taking that opportunity type thing. Let me read this quote. So this is Brian Bell from Weezer. I know that it has, talking about music theory, I know that it has helped me. I know the issue is always people like Paul McCartney who claim to not be able to read music, and he's one of the best there is. Then there's people like Herbie Hancock, who's a teacher across the road from where I live at UCLA, and I'm dying to take classes with him at the Herb Alpert School of Music. He's one of the teachers there. I just watched a movie last night that he did the score for, and it's unbelievable. It was Death Wish with Charles Bronson, and when you listen to music, it's just mind blowing. Sometimes it is, but to me, learning music theory and how to read, it's like learning a book of spells. It's alchemy. It's a nice way of putting it. Where am I? I lost it. It's alchemy.
Why wouldn't you learn it?
Why wouldn't you learn it? It's another depth of knowledge that you can have. Of course, it makes you better. I guess I have more of a mathematical mind, and it clarifies it for me. I want those answers, so I seek them out, and I've never stopped. I started with piano, and I went to music school after high school. When I went to UCLA, I feel like it would be like deaf to not try and learn more. And I didn't expect that of someone who plays in Weezer. You know what I mean? Very interesting.
Oh, you could be the most reductive or minimalist musician in the planet and still have a great affiliation and love for the nuances of technicality and learning music theory. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I try not to think of people as being limited to their band and their ability, because I tell you, it was a partial eye opener for me. Not that I instantly tar people with what you play versus as the level you're at, and that's it. When we were talking about, was it Five Finger Death Punch and their guitarist, Zoltan Bathory, and you were talking about him being a really busy
Jason Hook,
being a really busy session musician.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That was a bit of an eye opener. He's in a band that I don't particularly like. I think it's not my cup, is the nicest way to put it. But then you're talking about this guy and being like, no, he's the real deal.
No, he's done a lot. I'm sure he played with Miley Cyrus, did the Miley Cyrus stuff. Done a lot of stuff. Jason Hook, he really has done a lot of stuff.
Oh, big Darryl Davis is in this.
Yeah,
for a quote.
Yeah, I know. Go on, read it.
Yes, Darryl, go on your cell.
Read it.
For anybody that doesn't know who Darryl Davis is, you need to look this guy up. Just fucking, just the best guy on the planet is probably the nicest way to put it. So, Darryl Davis, do you feel that sometimes getting too deep into music theory can take away from the heart of a song? See, this I think is where this full theory versus feel clashes, and that's where the question is, do people actually think that way? And Darryl Davis says, yes, I'll give you an example. When I was in high school and decided to major in music, 3 of the universities that I chose to explore, I looked at Berklee College in Boston, Howard University in Washington DC, and Morehouse in Atlanta, Georgia. Most of the places back then didn't have jazz programs. None of them had rock and roll programs. Most of them were all classical programs. A few schools had jazz programs. Berklee did and Howard did. That was as close as I could get to rock and roll. I chose Howard for 2 reasons. First, it was close to home. It was about 9 miles from my house, even though I was going to live on campus and get that college campus experience. But also, at the time, when I would listen to a jazz record, I could tell if the trumpet player went to Berklee or if the guitar player went to Berklee. They all played the same.
Yeah.
They all improvised the same. See, that wasn't really improvisation. It was something that was contrived. You were taught to use a certain scale or mode when you're playing over this chord. So there was a lot of restrictions. When you listen to B.B. King play, he's not thinking about what scale or mode he's playing. He's playing from right here in his heart and in his head. When he's getting that quarter note because he's bending the string, it's all feel. A guy like Robert Johnson, he couldn't read one lick of music, but listen to the intricacies of what he played on the guitar. That didn't come from school, it came from the heart. So I chose not to go to Berklee because everything was so similar back then. Now, of course, Berklee has evolved, and you really can't tell today because the combined feel and technicality of the scales and the modes. It's important to have both.
But still, Berklee funk is still absolutely a genre. Everyone that comes out of Berklee plays that Berklee funk sound. Great quote. I'm going to read one last quote,
yes,
and then run off. So, John Petrucci, Dream Theater. Well, I think that that's one of these debates that has come up. There's a fear that learning too much about music might change the way that you create in a negative way, where maybe you overthink things. I think it really depends on the person. I do believe that some people have the gift of music and raw talent, and I think that some people find that path without any schooling. It's like they're born with it. It doesn't mean that they don't have to work hard at their craft, but they just have this innate gift. So I have a lot of respect for, and don't take anything away from, the players that you mentioned at all. That's in reference to Kurt Cobain and Billie Joe Armstrong. Mm-hmm. In fact, they are people who write great music and are great at what they do, or were in the case of Kurt Cobain. But I've also seen where people who take the path where maybe they have that gift like I was describing, and then they go to school and it changes a bit. It could change for the positive or for the negative. I think it's a difficult question to answer because I think it depends on the person. If I take my own experience of going to Berklee, learning about music and music theory, it helped open my mind and it helped to give me more options as a player to grab from. But when I create music, I want, let's do that again. When I create music, what I try to do is still approach it from that raw primal beginning. When you get into the weeds, as you said, there's a scroll, as you said, you're trying to figure stuff out and you're trying to craft your songs, which is a big part of it. Then all that music training comes into play and you have more options than you would have had if you hadn't had that training. It's like any other art form. You have people who are amazing dancers and artists, but as they train and they get into different disciplines, their options grow and it helps them to become better. The only time it might hinder is when you lose sight of that original spark, that gut feeling that you originally had for your art form. So there's a balance, there's a deep question that you asked there, and there's a lot of debate around it, and I don't think there's a clear answer to it. I think it depends on the person and their life experience. Yeah, great quote. Killer quote.
Very much so. I think to go back into, to go with Gucci Mane, a man without sauce is lost, but a man can also get lost in the sauce. Which is, I know you're laughing, man, but that is like, that's Socrates. It is. It's just so direct. So essentially, if we're to break this down, essentially what you're saying is, if you don't have substance, if you don't understand why you're doing something, and you don't have any sort of understanding to back up how you're doing it, then you'll be fucked. But you could very easily be lost in the technique rather than the output.
So that was, a man without sauce is lost, but a man can also get lost in the sauce.
Correct.
But a man can also get lost if he doesn't own an Ormsby. This show has been brought to you by Ormsby Guitars. If you are unfamiliar with Ormsby and what they do, I would recommend you head on over to ormsbyguitars.com. Absolutely wonderful instruments made out of Australia by Perry Ormsby. You know, they focus on a lot of really interesting things, probably most notably the multi-scale thing. You can see a couple of them hanging behind my head. I am a big fan of the Goliath series. Having said that, I've also almost ordered myself a Hype over the years, and I think the thing that Ormsby do that, well, lots of companies have dabbled in, but they do a great job of it, is these runs of builds. You can go on their website now, check out the pre-order section of their website, and you will see a series of upcoming runs of guitar. You can get in on those with prepayment plans and really get yourself a nice, well-built instrument for an unbelievable price. So thanks to Ormsby Guitars for supporting the show. Go and check them out and let them know that we sent you. Thanks very much. So there we go. As always, a massive thank you to our friends over at Ormsby Guitars. Please do go and check them out. And I've really enjoyed that discussion. We didn't get to read nearly as many of those quotes as I wanted to read, but that was because we were enjoying the discussion that we had. And we're just so pressed for time today that I had to run off, unfortunately. But this is a subject that we should absolutely come back to, and we hope that you guys have enjoyed it. Let us know in that comment section below if you're enjoying this as a subject. We're more than happy to talk about this type of stuff, as well as the other news-related stuff that we do. I'm sure you'd agree with me on that, Mike. You had fun with this?
Absolutely. What actually I'm looking forward to, if it's going to happen, is people leaving comments of, try and work out this chord progression. Yeah. And you and I could do it sitting in your your studio, and fuck, I'll have a crack at it and see how far I get, and you can correct me on how wrong I am, and things like that, or even questions about theory versus feel, kind of what our answers would be to some of the questions that were presented to the rock stars, etc. Sure. I think it could be an interesting spark to get people interested in the balance and where on the spectrum you fall, because you don't have to be 100% theory intelligent, you don't have to be 100% ear trained to get a good balance. Absolutely. Like it works out.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely on that. Yeah, I think that's also a great suggestion. So please do leave some suggestions of things that me and Mike could have a stab at the chord progression on and use for some wider discussion, because it's an interesting one. And of course, we hope that we've inspired you to go and do some of your own. Like, try and work out a chord progression. It's great use of your time. Help develop that ear, and then I promise you, over the coming months, my series on mastering music theory, but also maybe future discussions that me and Mike will have, will help you to get a deeper understanding of not just what you played, but why it functions, why it is what it is, how you can take that essence from that and, you know, use it on other things. Music theory doesn't have to just turn you into Steve Vai, you know, it doesn't just have to turn you into Frank Zappa. It's entirely possible to learn music theory and apply it to country songwriting or whatever it happens to be. Like, these are all useful skills. I think one of the masters of it, and then they weren't even really tuned into the theory side of things. I know they weren't theory guys, but one of the greatest, and I know you're not a fan as well, one of the greatest artists that you can study for harmony and interesting chord progressions is the Beatles. Their music was just full of great chord progressions.
Whether I'm a fan or not, you can't deny that the Beatles they pretty much advanced songwriting.
Yeah. And
ridiculously. And ABBA are ridiculous for fucking harmony and understanding layers and just in general. Sorry to cut you off, but there's lots of good examples.
Yeah, and they often go, we ignore them. It's not that I think we underappreciate just how much you can learn from things that aren't necessarily technically demanding stuff. You don't need to learn music theory and then go out and play ridiculously over the top jazz, funk, progressive metal fusion. Like, you don't have to do that. You can learn music theory and use it to make you a better songwriter. These are all things that are available at your disposal. So yeah, go and learn a bit more. It's a lot of fun. Mike, until next time.
Bye, fuckers.